Hello my fellow weirdos, how are you today? What if I told you I made the greatest Titan build ever? Well, then I'd be lying to you. But what I can confidently tell you is we have a build that's guaranteed to give us a constant uptime on a weapon damage buff, spam abilities, and keep us alive a lot longer. One of the biggest complaints I've seen about Arc 3.0 is the healing, or I should say lack of. Titans aren't supposed to be squishy, and I'm not referring to the resilience bug. The glass cannon feeling can be fun at times, but I completely understand where players are coming from on this one. It gets a bit frustrating in endgame content, especially after having the Loreley Splendor meta. But luckily for us, we have an exotic that fixes this issue. Let me introduce you to the Precious Scars. I know most of you probably have this exotic sitting in your vault. I think it's time to finally knock the dust off and see what it can do. This exotic came out with Beyond Light, and when it first dropped, it was terrible. I mean, really bad. It did absolutely nothing, and that's not an exaggeration. I'm pretty sure it was just broken, but Bungie reworked it and now it's top tier, but nobody uses it. The exotic perk is called Kintsugi. Final blows from a weapon matching our subclass create a 60 HP burst of healing for us and our teammates within 15 meters. There is a 3-second cooldown in between bursts, but when chaining kills, it's not that noticeable. It also provides a 100 HP overshield when reviving our trash fire team members. It's okay to admit it, we all have a few. This comes in handy when they die in a bad spot that might be a bit risky. It'll help us survive to get away. But we're not relying solely on the exotic to keep us alive. That would make for a very boring video. This is where the subclass and mods play heavily into this build. When the Arc rework happened, I was hesitant to use the new Thruster Dodge class ability. I thought it was lackluster, until I realized it has a 12-second cooldown with 100 resilience, and that's without collecting any ionic traces or elemental wells. When paired with Reaping Wellmaker, you know, the mod that drops void wells when getting weapon kills after using our class ability, and Well of Tenacity, this almost becomes a consistent 40% damage reduction, because Well of Tenacity has a 6-second timer at base. If we do add in wells and ionic traces, we're now talking 8-second class ability cooldowns here, because for every trace collected, we get 12.5% grenade and melee energy and 15% class ability energy. So the real question is, how do we keep the uptime on Kintsugi and create a ton of elemental wells and ionic traces for Well of Tenacity? One surefire way of creating the traces is through the aspect Touch of Thunder and the Pulse Grenade. The Touch of Thunder aspect causes our pulse grenades to increase damage over time and spit out ionic traces periodically. It says periodically, but it's more like every couple of seconds. But that's only the beginning. With Spark of Shock, Ions, and Discharge, we can now create even more ionic traces. Spark of Shock jolts targets affected by our grenades and chains lightning to nearby enemies, jolting them as well. If we defeat the jolted targets, that creates an ionic trace through Spark of Ions. And if we defeat them with an arc weapon, we're now creating another trace from Spark of Discharge. Coincidentally, that arc weapon kill to create an ionic trace is also healing us from Precious Scars. To further drive that tanky Titan feeling home, I chose Knockout as the second aspect for the health regen from melee kills, along with giving us a 4th fragment slot to take advantage of Spark of Resistance for a 25% damage reduction while surrounded. This, paired with Precious Scars and Well of Tenacity, makes us one tanky boy. We've already covered 2 of the mods in this build, Reaping Wellmaker and Well of Tenacity. The last 3 serve 2 purposes: to feed our ability regen and give us a consistent 25% damage buff to weapons. Elemental armaments and ordnance drop wells from weapon kills matching our subclass and grenade kills. In our case, it would be arc wells to feed Font of Might for the weapon damage buff to all arc weapons. The arc weapon damage buff is important because the faster we can kill adds, the easier it'll be to proc Kintsugi on the Precious Scars, drop wells, and create ionic traces from Spark of Ions and Discharge. The more wells and traces we create, the faster we get our class ability to take advantage of Well of Tenacity and Reaping Wellmaker. For some bonus survivability and ability regen, some good minor mods to add to the mix are Harmonic Siphon on the helmet to create orbs from arc weapon kills, damage resistance mods on the chest for survivability, recuperation and innervation on the legs for health and grenade recharge rate, and the artifact mod Lightning Strikes Twice on the class item for even more grenade energy. This video is geared towards the Arc subclass, but one of the great things about this build is that it works with any subclass and matching weapon. Granted, we will have some cooldown variations and the obvious aspect and fragment changes, but this leaves a lot of possibilities for champion mods and actual fun weapons to use even in the future. I was using the Risk Runner in the intro, but I've tested this build with Salvager Salvo, First In Last Out, Trinity Ghoul, Thunderlord, and pretty much any other weapon I had laying around. The build isn't fancy, but when it comes to survivability on the Arc Titan, I don't think it gets any better. The Precious Scars is a great exotic that doesn't get enough love. Try it out and let me know what you think. If you found this video helpful, a like would be awesome. But more importantly, be true to yourself, be good to one another, and have a fantastic day. Thank you!
I don't fucking take smoke, I'm a poker hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude, crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently, thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty.